Let's look at our digital clock example in the Windows Form folder. We're going to just create a digital clock here. This is going to pop up based on the constructor. We can just hit OK and I'll explain it. And then we just have a clock, and you can see the opacity changes when it's not active. When it's deactivated, the opacity is going to be a little bit transparent there, 70%, and it comes back when we click on it. So I'll show you how that works. And then the quit button is enabled as well with a click event there just to close. So if we take a peek, that first thing that we're going to notice is in the constructor, after the initialized component, we're going to do that message box.show. That's what we see here. That's because that's demonstrating that before that form actually gets displayed in the constructor, we can do whatever we want. The form won't be displayed yet. And after the form load is when you're going to see the form load. Actually, that's when you know it's loaded. Form load is another event. So then we also change the opacity to 0.7, but you don't notice that because down below we have an activated event here. And that's going to change it to 1. So it becomes active. You don't see that 0.7. It's just not noticeable. It does happen. But immediately it's going to change to 1, which is 100%. 0.7 is 70%. So we can set that up. I'll show you how we did that. We just go through and you'll see that this components is going to be used now. The system.component model I container as our components. The interface to containers. Now let's peek down low. Dispose is normal. Nothing new. And in the window form designer generated code, we just have our initialized component method, and you can see that our this.components is being set up for us. And then after our suspend layout, we're actually going to be working with a timer. Now, timer is a component, not a control. What we do is we enable it to true with the property. We give it an interval of every second, which is 1,000. 2,000 is 2 seconds. 3,000 is 3 seconds. Every 1,000 is a second. Less than that, if you wanted to put in a value under 1,000, that would be x over 1,000, or if it was 1, then it would be 1 over 1,000. So 1/1000th. Depends on what you need. Now, let's see here. We have our event here that's being handled, the tick event. It's going to be using the timer1 tick method there to work with that event. The delegate event handler, as we've seen, this is the normal thing that we do to get the event to work. Everything else is pretty similar. We do this from the form designer. We make these changes that we want to the properties. No big deal. And we're not doing this really in the code here. We're going to do that from the designer. You can see that we have different things like border style, back color, fore color, changing the color of the button. The first label is actually going to be the clock values that are going to be displayed. And as we move down, we have my clock. That normal base scale size when we resize. The back color of our form, this is all form related. We're adding those 3 controls, but note that we don't add our timer there because it's a component. This is the control collection. We put the maximize box and the minimize box. These are going to be placed as false. You're going to see that they're going to be dimmed out. You can't use them. Name for the form, text at the top in the title bar. We're going to work with the load event. We just set it up. Don't use it. Activate it and deactivate it here are the events that we're going to be working with that I'll describe. We just set up the load event, and I just show you that the handler at the bottom is going to be set up. It's not going to be actually used, and that's when the form actually gets loaded. So we could actually take and copy this code and place it there. And as we slide all the way down, we'll talk about the events while we're here. We have our load for our form. Activate it. When that gets fired, that's going to change the opacity to 1. When it's deactive, when we're no longer in that form, it's going to get changed to 0.7 or 70%. And then here we're just going to have a loaded message box here when the load event gets fired. As we slide up, application exit for the button click as usual. And then we have our timer. Timer is going to return a string from this process time function, which is just our method that I created. And it's going to put the time into the text. Now, when this object comes, any event that is coming from the timer itself, that's going to be indicating to us that that is the one that we want to trap. And then that's going to just update the time over and over again. because someone else could trigger that event as well, but we don't want to do that. We just want to worry about when the timer itself falls asleep, comes back and says, okay, 1 second passed. If it can really fall asleep in 1 second, but that's what it does basically. So then in our process time, what we do is we just set up variables to hold the date time, which is now, the hour, minutes, and seconds in integer values. We're going to create a string, as you can see, hours, minutes, and seconds. Now, this is a special syntax that allows us to do an if condition, basically, and the question mark is saying, well, if hour is less than 10, then we basically want to add a 0 to the front of that. This is the true part, colon, this is the false part. So if this hour is less than 10, that means it is only one digit, and we want to put a 0 in front, prefix it. Otherwise, we want to leave it alone. Those are all three the same thing, no big deal. And then we just return that string. All right, so we can just run. That's the constructor. Now it's loaded. You still don't see it. Right before now it's loaded, it's displayed. So anything else you can also put into the form loaded as opposed to the constructor. That's another way to do it. So that's how it works basically. And again, the opacity would be set. You can test that by having something open. But very nice to get that quick and easy, show you how to work with your form controls a little bit more. You can come back in here and actually change the properties here to suit your needs.